Before becoming a legend in the world of bodybuilding, Ronnie Coleman's story began in a remarkably humble way. Ronald Dean Coleman was born on May 13, 1964, in the city of Monroe, Louisiana, in the United States. Although he was born there, it was in the small town of Bastrop where he truly grew up and spent most of his childhood. Life wasn't easy. His family lived with very limited resources, and from an early age Ronnie learned that life demanded hard work. Ronnie grew up alongside two brothers and was raised primarily by his mother, who worked in a sewing factory. She did everything she could to make sure her children had what they needed, even while struggling financially. Many times she would bring clothing from the factory home, sewing and adjusting pieces so the kids would have something to wear. That simple, hard-working environment deeply shaped Ronnie's character. After all, when you grow up watching your family fight every day just to get by, lessons about effort and responsibility become second nature. Another important figure during Ronnie's childhood was his stepfather. He introduced Ronnie to activities typical of life in the countryside, like hunting and fishing. Among those, fishing quickly became Ronnie's favorite. He loved jumping on his bicycle and riding long distances just to reach the spots where he could spend hours by the water. And it wasn't always just for fun. Sometimes he even sold the fish he caught, earning a few extra dollars along the way. But the truth is that Ronnie's childhood wasn't just about hobbies or free time. At a very young age, he had already started working. Around the age of 12 or 13, he landed a small job at a convenience store. The pay wasn't much, but at that time it meant something important. On top of that, Ronnie would walk around the neighborhood knocking on doors offering simple services, like mowing lawns or helping with small chores. As Ronnie Coleman grew older, something started to become increasingly obvious to everyone around him: he had a natural gift for sports. During high school, Ronnie didn't limit himself to just one activity. In fact, he competed in several different sports. Among them were American football, track and field, and weight training. This variety helped him develop not only strength but also coordination, endurance, and discipline, qualities that would later become crucial in his bodybuilding career. In track and field, Ronnie competed in demanding events like the discus throw and the javelin throw. And he wasn't just participating for fun. He often stood out in school competitions, proving that he had a naturally athletic build. His physique already caught people's attention, but even more impressive was his dedication to training. Coaches and teammates quickly noticed that Ronnie was willing to put in the work. It was clear there was enormous potential being developed there. It was during this time that Ronnie began to take weight training more seriously. However, contrary to what many people might imagine today, he didn't start out as the strongest athlete on the team. In fact, Ronnie himself has said that in the beginning some of his teammates were lifting far heavier than he was. While some athletes at his school were already squatting 200 or even 300 kilograms, roughly 440 to 660 pounds, Ronnie was still far from those numbers. But this was exactly the moment when one of Ronnie's most defining traits began to show: persistence. Instead of getting discouraged when he saw stronger athletes around him, he did the opposite. He trained harder and harder, always trying to improve a little with every session. Day after day, rep after rep, Ronnie steadily built his strength. Over time, that dedication started to produce impressive results. The gap that once seemed so large slowly disappeared. Years later, Ronnie Coleman would reach numbers that seemed almost unbelievable for any athlete. After finishing high school, Ronnie took an important step toward his future. He enrolled at Grambling State University. There, he had the opportunity to continue developing his athletic potential at a much more competitive level. Ronnie joined the GSU Tigers and played college football for the team, which was well respected in the American collegiate sports scene. The program was led by Eddie Robinson, a legendary coach who shaped generations of athletes. Being under the leadership of someone so influential helped strengthen Ronnie's discipline and competitive mindset even further. In college football, Ronnie continued to demonstrate both his impressive physique and his commitment to training. The university environment was far more demanding, filled with highly prepared athletes all competing for a spot on the team. Even so, Ronnie held his ground, learning how to deal with pressure, competition, and an intense training routine. This stage of his life played a crucial role in building the mental toughness that would later become essential during his legendary career in bodybuilding. But college wasn't just about sports. Ronnie also took his education very seriously. At first, he enrolled in a business administration program, thinking it would help secure a stable future outside of athletics. Over time, however, he realized he had a stronger interest in numbers and financial analysis. That's when one of his professors suggested something that would change his academic path, switching his major to accounting. Ronnie decided to follow that advice. He believed accounting could open the door to more secure professional opportunities and offer a stable career path. Known for his discipline and dedication, Ronnie consistently maintained strong grades throughout his studies. For those who knew him at the time, he was seen as an intelligent, responsible student focused on building a solid future. In 1986, Ronnie Coleman graduated from Grambling State University with a degree in accounting. It was a major achievement for someone who had grown up in a modest household in Louisiana. But life was about to prove that even a college diploma wouldn't necessarily guarantee the path he had envisioned. After earning his degree, Ronnie believed his life would finally start falling into place. After all, he had studied hard, stayed disciplined, and followed what many consider the safest route, getting a college education. But the reality of the job market turned out to be very different. Despite sending out resumes and actively searching for opportunities, Ronnie kept running into the same problem: lack of professional experience. Unable to land a job in the field he studied, he had to take whatever opportunity came his way. That's how Ronnie ended up working at Domino's Pizza. Financially, things were tight, and that job was far from the future he had imagined when he first stepped onto a college campus. Still, Ronnie approached the work with the same mindset he had always carried: do the best you can with what you have. Interestingly, there was one small perk that helped during that difficult time: free food. For someone struggling financially, that made a big difference. Ronnie later shared that sometimes he would trade pizzas for burgers with employees from nearby restaurants like Burger King or KFC. It was a simple way to change up his meals and deal with a routine that, at times, felt very limited. Even so, Ronnie never stopped searching for something better. For about 2 years, he continued trying to find an opportunity in accounting. But the rejection letters kept coming. Then one day, while casually flipping through a newspaper, he came across an ad that would completely change the direction of his life. The local police department was recruiting new officers, and no prior experience was required. Ronnie decided to give it a shot. He applied, was accepted, and began his career in law enforcement. And once again, one of the traits that would later define him started to stand out: his dedication. In a short period of time, Ronnie distinguished himself among the new recruits and even received the Rookie of the Year award, given to the best first-year officer in the department. But what no one realized at the time was that while Ronnie Coleman was patrolling the streets as a police officer, he was still only taking the first steps toward a much bigger destiny. Even while working as a police officer, Ronnie never abandoned his training routine. Weightlifting was already a big part of his life, and he took it very seriously. Still, at that point, Ronnie had no idea he was about to enter a completely different world. And interestingly enough, it all started in the most unexpected way, during a simple, everyday moment. One day, while walking down the street, someone commented on Ronnie's massive size and impressive physique. The person asked where he trained. Ronnie casually replied that he worked out at the police station gym because it was free. It was almost said as a joke, but that simple answer ended up opening a door that would completely change his life. That conversation eventually led Ronnie to meet Brian Dobson, the owner of the famous Metroflex Gym, a gym known for its hardcore environment and extremely dedicated athletes. The moment Brian saw Ronnie, he noticed something special. He recognized enormous potential in this police officer who, up until that point, had been training without any professional guidance for bodybuilding competitions. Brian made Ronnie a simple but life-changing offer: he could train for free at Metroflex Gym. In return, Brian just wanted the chance to help develop his potential. From that moment on, Ronnie began training in a completely different environment, surrounded by serious athletes and guided by someone who truly understood the sport. But Brian wasn't just someone who offered Ronnie a place to train. He became a true mentor. It was Brian who taught Ronnie about nutrition, training strategies, and one of the most crucial elements in bodybuilding competitions: posing. Brian believed so strongly in Ronnie's potential that he made a bold prediction for the time that this young police officer could one day become a world champion. With that guidance, Ronnie entered his first bodybuilding competition and won. That moment made him realize he might have finally discovered his true path. Within the world of bodybuilding, there is one stage that represents the absolute peak of any athlete's career, the Mr. Olympia. Created in 1965 by Joe Weider, the competition brings together only the best bodybuilders on the planet. Winning the Olympia means entering the history books of the sport. It's essentially the World Cup of bodybuilding. For Ronnie Coleman, simply reaching that stage was already a huge achievement, but staying there and winning would prove to be a much greater challenge. When Ronnie first began competing at the Mr. Olympia, reality hit hard. Unlike the dominant image many fans associate with him today, his early appearances were far from victorious. In 1994, for example, he finished in 15th place. For an athlete who dreamed of becoming the best in the world, that result was far from what he hoped for. It was a clear reminder that the very top of professional bodybuilding was an extremely competitive arena. The following year, Ronnie showed signs of progress. In 1995, he moved up several spots and finished in 11th place. It still wasn't the result he was chasing, but it signaled that something was changing. His physique was improving, his stage presence was evolving, and little by little he was beginning to get noticed among the elite of the sport. Even so, the road ahead was still full of obstacles. In 1997, after previously managing to break into the top 6 in another season, Ronnie suffered a major psychological blow when he finished 9th place. For many athletes, a result like that could mark the beginning of the end. Professional bodybuilding demands years of extreme dedication, physical sacrifice, and mental resilience, and even then, results aren't guaranteed. But there was always something that set Ronnie Coleman apart from most competitors: his ability to keep moving forward even when things weren't going his way. Instead of giving up, he returned to the gym more determined than ever. Even after facing frustrating results at the Mr. Olympia, Ronnie never abandoned his dream of becoming the best bodybuilder in the world. Rather than letting those setbacks define him, he began searching for new opportunities in other major competitions on the professional circuit. Ronnie competed in the Ironman Pro and the Arnold Classic, two highly respected events in bodybuilding. Little by little, he began to show progress, improving his placements and proving that his potential was far from fully realized. During this period, Ronnie went through a moment of doubt about his future in bodybuilding. The pressure of competition and inconsistent results started to weigh on him. That's when he sought advice from one of the biggest names in the sport at the time, Kevin Levrone. Interestingly, the advice had nothing to do with lifting heavier weights or completely changing his training. Levrone told him something much simpler: Ronnie needed to relax and stop putting so much pressure on himself. That seemingly simple moment ended up having a powerful impact. Ronnie began competing with a different mindset, more confident and far less burdened by pressure. Not long after, he entered the Grand Prix Russia and shocked everyone by winning the competition, even defeating Kevin Levrone himself. That victory was a clear sign that Ronnie Coleman was ready for something much bigger. But the journey still wouldn't be easy. During an extremely heavy squat session, Ronnie suffered a serious injury, a herniated disc, diagnosed in December 1996. Doctors recommended that he reduce the intensity of his training to avoid further damage. For many athletes, that kind of diagnosis could mean the end of a career, or at the very least, a major slowdown. Ronnie, however, saw things differently. Even knowing the risks, he kept his goal crystal clear: becoming the greatest bodybuilder in the world. And it was precisely that mindset that led to one of the most historic moments in the sport. In 1998, Ronnie Coleman stepped onto the Mr. Olympia stage with a physique that was simply unbelievable. Against all expectations, he defeated one of the biggest favorites in the competition, Flex Wheeler. The victory was emotional and unexpected. Ronnie didn't just win, he launched a new era in bodybuilding. Ronnie's victory at the 1998 Mr. Olympia wasn't just another title in his career. In reality, that moment marked the beginning of one of the most dominant eras bodybuilding has ever seen. From that point forward, Ronnie didn't just compete, he dominated the sport. Year after year, he stepped on stage presenting physiques that were even more impressive, combining massive size, muscle density, and extreme conditioning in a way the sport had rarely seen before. The result of that consistency was historic. Ronnie Coleman went on to win 8 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles, tying the legendary record previously set by Lee Haney. Very few athletes in the history of bodybuilding have ever reached that level of dominance. For nearly a decade, Ronnie wasn't just one of the best competitors on stage, he became the standard by which everyone else was measured. But Ronnie's success wasn't limited to the Olympia stage. Throughout his career as an IFBB professional, he accumulated 26 professional wins, an incredible number that further cemented his place among the greatest bodybuilders of all time. Every victory strengthened his reputation and expanded his influence within the sport. Another factor that helped build the Ronnie Coleman legend was his training style. His workouts became famous all over the world for something that almost seemed unbelievable: insanely heavy weights. Ronnie performed squats, deadlifts, and bench presses with loads that most athletes wouldn't even attempt. In many cases, those numbers represented the absolute limit of strength for other bodybuilders. And perhaps even more impressive, for Ronnie, many of those weights weren't even the peak of the workout. In several interviews, he mentioned that certain lifts were just part of his warm-up. That level of intensity and mindset helped build not only an extraordinary physique but also a reputation that would become legendary throughout the fitness world. After years of dominating the global bodybuilding scene, Ronnie Coleman reached a pivotal moment in his career. In 2006, he stepped onto the Mr. Olympia stage with one clear goal: to win his 9th title. If he succeeded, Ronnie would become the single greatest champion in the history of the competition, breaking the record he shared with Lee Haney. The anticipation was enormous, and many fans believed they were about to witness yet another historic moment. But professional bodybuilding is an unpredictable sport. That year, Ronnie faced an extremely determined competitor, Jay Cutler. After years of finishing just behind Coleman, Cutler finally brought a physique capable of challenging the reigning champion. When the results were announced, the audience witnessed something few people expected: the end of Ronnie Coleman's winning streak at the Mr. Olympia. Even so, Ronnie wasn't ready to walk away without one more fight. In 2007, he returned to the Olympia stage for what would be his final appearance. Many experts and fans questioned whether his physique could still compete with the new generation of athletes. Yet once again, Ronnie showed why he was considered one of the greatest in the sport. In that final performance, he earned a respectable 4th-place finish. While it wasn't the result fans had grown accustomed to during his reign, it still demonstrated the extraordinary level Ronnie had maintained throughout his career. Very few athletes manage to remain competitive for so long in a sport as demanding as professional bodybuilding. After more than a decade competing among the best bodybuilders on the planet, Ronnie Coleman decided it was time to retire from the stage. It marked the end of an era. When he stepped away from competition, many wondered what would come next for the man who had dominated bodybuilding for so many years. For someone used to the intense routine of training camps and competitions, retirement could have created a huge void. But Ronnie quickly proved he still had plenty left to build outside the competitive stage. One of the paths he chose was the business world. Leveraging his massive reputation in the sport, Ronnie launched his own supplement brand. The market response was immediate. The company grew quickly and gained international traction. In its first year alone, revenue reached around $4 million, and shortly after that it jumped to approximately $15 million, expanding into markets around the world. It was also during this phase of his life that Ronnie met his future wife, Susan. The two met at an event connected to the bodybuilding industry, and they quickly formed a strong bond. Susan already had 2 daughters, while Ronnie had 2 sons. Together, they built a family of 4 children, bringing a new sense of meaning to his life beyond the stage and competitions. But while his personal and professional life continued moving forward, Ronnie's body began revealing the cost of so many years of extreme training. The massive weights that helped build his legend had also taken a heavy toll physically. Over time, Ronnie began to face serious issues with his spine and hips. Those problems eventually led to multiple surgeries over the years. Ronnie underwent several procedures on his spine and also 2 hip replacements. Despite the efforts of doctors and specialists, These complications significantly affected both his mobility and his overall quality of life. Today, Ronnie Coleman faces perhaps the most difficult challenge of his entire life. After decades of pushing his body to the absolute limit, the physical consequences have begun to appear in a severe way. Ronnie now lives with chronic pain and serious mobility limitations. At times, he even needs assistance just to walk. For someone who once lifted some of the most unbelievable weights in bodybuilding history, that reality is undeniably tough. And yet, there is one thing that has never changed: his mindset. Even after countless surgeries and repeated medical advice to slow down his physical activity, Ronnie still shows up at the gym. And not just any gym. Many times, he can still be seen training at the legendary Metroflex gym, the very place where his bodybuilding journey began. And as if that weren't impressive enough, he often starts his workouts around 4:30 in the morning. It's a routine that proves that even in the face of immense challenges, his passion for training is still very much alive. This phase of Ronnie's life raises a question that divides opinions within the bodybuilding community itself: what is the true price of greatness? For many fans, Ronnie Coleman represents the ultimate level of dedication an athlete can have, a man who didn't just train hard, but pushed the limits of the human body into territory few have ever dared to explore. On the other hand, there is also an important debate about the risks of pushing the body to such extreme levels. Professional bodybuilding demands enormous sacrifices, and Ronnie's story is often used as an example of just how far an athlete can go, both in terms of achievements and the physical consequences that may follow. But regardless of how people choose to interpret this story, one thing is impossible to deny: Ronnie Coleman left a permanent mark on the world of bodybuilding. His legacy isn't just about the 8 Mr. Olympia titles, the legendary training sessions, or the records he shattered. It lives on in the inspiration he continues to represent for generations of athletes. And perhaps the biggest question his story leaves us with is this: how far can someone go when they decide they will never quit?